Well, welcome back. So now I'm going to take a minute and actually, I don't think I've ever told a story in a minute, but be that as it may, I'm going to take some time here to give you some insight into how I began my Air Force career. I actually began at Aerospace Munitions as a weapons load officer assigned to the 430th Tactical Fighter Squadron at Nellis Air Force Base. I had a little issue with a color deficiency problem, which I'll tell you about later. But here I was in January 1969, driving on base at Nellis in Las Vegas in a brand new 1969 Firebird, second lieutenant, and I was assigned to the 430th Tactical Fighter Squadron, which had F-111As at the time. Now we didn't have a lot of them because they were still coming off the line there, the production line in Fort Worth. So we'd get onesie twosies, but we didn't have a full complement of airplanes at that time anyway. So in the 430th, I was a weapons load officer in charge of 105 airmen, ranging from airman basic to chief master sergeants. Right from the get-go out of training. I had had 6 months training at Lowry Air Force Base in Denver, and then moved on to Las Vegas. Now, that's not a bad way to start the Air Force. 6 months in Denver, followed by a tour in Las Vegas. So I show up and I get 105 of these guys working for me. Great guys, by and large. Young guys. But we also had several Vietnam veterans coming back, staff sergeants, and they were the core of the unit. So I show up, I have 105 guys. Now I'm coming out of ROTC. I thought I was somebody. Give me a break. So one morning, I told Tech Sergeant Leon Jones, who was the in charge number 2 guy in the weapons load division or section, I said, I'd like to inspect the troops. You moron. Anyway, me being the moron, not Sergeant Jones. So Sergeant Jones called the guys out the next morning at 0600, had them all out there in line. I walked through the ranks, and I don't know if I particularly had a clue what I was doing. Probably not. But anyway, when the inspection was over, the airmen went over to their break room, and I went back into my office. And as I'm walking through the hall, heading to my office, we had these partitions, and I overheard Sergeant Jones tell Sergeant Davis, who the hell does that kid think he is, inspecting my troops when his hair is down to his ass? Oh, crap. And I kind of knew what he was saying. But anyway, I just kind of continued on through the hall, grabbed my hat, went out and got my 1969 Firebird, and drove up to the officers club where they had a base barber shop up there. And I walked in, and the gal says, can I help you? And I said, yes, ma'am. I said, take it all off. I really just wanted down to just a buzz haircut. So she did. So then I got in the car, drove back, and I went hunting for Sergeant Jones. I had my hat on. I walked up to Sergeant Jones, and I took my hat off, and I said, think I comply with standards now? That guy stood, took him a second to realize that I had overheard him, and he turned bright red. And we became very close friends at that moment, just very close. So I might as well go ahead and tell you, Sergeant Jones was unique. He was full-blooded Cherokee Indian, Leon Jones. And later, after he completed his Air Force career, he went back to the Cherokee Nation in North Carolina, and eventually became chief of the Cherokee Nation, and then he went on to become a federal judge. Just remarkable individuals I had the opportunity to work with. So now back to the weapons load unit. I had in the unit were 2 chief master sergeants, Sergeant Edwards and Sergeant Lunwall. Both highly experienced individuals, probably both in their mid-50s at the time. I'm 22. But anyway, they were truly respectful of me. never did I suspect anything but total respect. So these guys, in the morning, when I'd come in, they'd be sitting there, and they had their desks butted up against each other. And they would read the newspaper. They would sit there reading the newspaper, and one of them would be reading the paper, the other one would be working the crossword puzzle. And then about 10 o'clock, they decided it was time to go over to the NCO club for a break. Well, okay, so they'd get up, walk over to the NCO club, have coffee. Come back about 10:30, quarter to 11, sit down, and now they'd have an exchange of the paper and the crossword puzzle, and the other guy would finish the crossword while the other first guy would finish reading the newspaper. Then he'd get up and head back over to the NCO club for lunch. That was kind of their routine. But they never skipped a beat. They knew what was going on in the unit. One day we had some young troops playing grab ass across the hangar in the break room, and one of them pushed the other one into the fire alarm, set off the fire alarm. So the whole hangar's just going nuts. That alarm's going crazy and so forth. Well, I kind of had an indication what was going on. I thought, oh crap, there goes my career. So I'm saying to Sergeant Edwards, I said, Sergeant Edwards, I said, what are we going to do about it? I said, we're probably going to get our asses in a sling because these guys were screwing around and yada, yada, yada. He said, Lieutenant, he says, throttle back. He said, just relax. He said, I got this. So he looked at his watch and went back to the crossword puzzle. And pretty soon we heard the fire trucks pull up. And these guys get out in their tinfoil suits, come walking into the hangar, trying to look around and see where the fire is. Edwards gets up from the crossword puzzle, walks out, looks at his watch, and he says, who's in charge here? And some staff sergeant says, that'd be me, sir. And Edwards says, it's been 7.5 minutes since that alarm went off and you guys showed up. He said, what do you think would have happened to aircraft if we had them in this hangar? And he proceeded to chew their asses out about their response times. Those guys just backed out of the building. They didn't want any part of Edwards. And he looked at me and winked and went back to his crossword puzzle. But one time I did get an audience with our squadron commander. The F-111A was new to the Air Force and certainly new to our squadron. So as such, we continue to have distinguished visitors being brought through the unit for show and tell. So this one day, the wing commander, I think his name might have been Shook, I don't remember, comes in with some congressional staffers. He comes into the weapons release shop, and Sergeant Lunwall was in there, and he was working on a bench, on a piece of equipment on the bench. So Sergeant Shook walks up and he says, Sergeant Lunwall here is one of our highly experienced maintenance technicians. He says, today he's working on, he looks over at the component, and he says, today he's working on, Sergeant Lunwall, what exactly are you working on? Lunwall says, oh, it's a 4-barrel carburetor for my 57 Chevrolet. Oh, crap. That time I did get an audience to explain why he was working on that on duty hours. But anyway, made for a good story even today. So the next guy I'll share with you is Sergeant Jim Davis. I can't explain why, but Sergeant Davis took a liking to me. And I would not be the person I am. I would not have been the officer I was. I would not have had the career I did had it not been for Sergeant Jim Davis. He mentored me in the ways of the Air Force, the ways of munitions, and we just stayed good buddies for my whole career. Right up through the time he passed away last year. God, I love that guy. We worked hard, and we played a little bit hard. In those days, it was kind of discouraged for officers to associate with enlisted men. But having been raised in the Air Force, I knew the distinction. I knew what it was all about. But I loved Jim as a man, and So I just kind of looked the other way. And we were able to maintain a professional relationship at work during duty hours. But then off duty, we spent a great deal of time fishing and just socializing. I would often go over to his house. He lived on base. I'd go over to his house after work and sit down and have a beer and wait for him to get off or wherever he was. And then we'd just sit there and just talk and just enjoyed his company. I mentioned that we used to enjoy going fishing. Well, often I would be out on a date on Friday night, and I would come back over to his house around 10:30, 11 o'clock whenever I was finished with my date, and just walk in his house and crash on his couch because we would be going fishing early the next morning. So I'd get up, we'd put the boat, get the boat ready, and then we'd drive up to Lake Mead and spend the day fishing. Well, he spent the day fishing. I spent the day sleeping. But anyway, he would sit there, "Hey, Lieutenant," he's like, "Got another one." And then we'd go on. He says, "Lieutenant," he said, "in order to catch fish, you got to put a line in the water." And that's the way we kind of bantered back and forth. Another time I got to his house and his boat sat right there off the side of his carport. So I was waiting for Jim. I walked in the house and got a beer and walked out and got his fishing tackle, put a weight on the end of the line, took the pole, threw it out in the yard, and just sat there. He drove up. He says, "What in the hell are you doing?" Oh, I had the radio on, so I had some music. I said, "Well, Jim," I said, "I'm just practicing dry fishing." And we would laugh about that silly stuff for years, silly things we did. But my goodness, what a great individual Sergeant James Davis was for me. And for those young people just perhaps going into the military as an officer, enlisted men and women can either make or break you. And I will tell you right flat out, listen to what they have to say. They are some of the most wonderful people you're going to encounter in your military service. Somebody once explained to me that oftentimes the guys furthest away from an issue at hand know the least about it. The guys the highest in rank and so forth. The guys lowest in rank who are working with the issue day in and day out will have your answers. So if you have a question about something, slide off down into the shops and talk to those individuals. Get to know them. You'll be just impressed with the caliber of individuals that work with you, that you have working with you. I think before I tie this up, I'm going to tell you, I'll tell you one more story here about one of the young troops, Airman Ward. Came to us right out of tech school. And he was in the break room, and those guys in the break room, they could be hard on new guys, new kids. So they told Sergeant Ward. Now, Sergeant Ward came from rural Georgia, and he had yet to learn the ways of the world, by and large. So they told Sergeant Ward that they had a project that they wanted to take, and they needed 50 yards of flight line. And they asked him if he would go to supply to get it. Well, he said sure, he'd be happy to. Well, then they called over to supply, and they told the supply guy, "Hey, we send in a young troop over here. He's going to want 50 yards of flight line." He said, "Claim you don't have it and send them to this squadron." So they did. They, in turn, called the 429th or whatever it was. He briefed them on what was coming off. And here comes Ward walking in. And they looked around the supply shop a little bit. They couldn't find it. So they sent him down to the 428th. Well, they were laughing so hard at Ward, they forgot to call the guy in the 428th. Well, when Airman Ward got to the 428th and walked in and asked for 50 yards of flight line, the sergeant behind the desk was in no mood for this kind of shenanigan, and he chewed Ward's ass out. I mean, he lit into him. And when Ward came back to the break room, he was just heartbroken that the guys would do something like that to him. And he took it pretty hard. Well, Sergeant Davis came in. He's listening. He says, how about saying something, Sergeant, or to Airman Ward? He said, he really is down. So I said, yeah, sure, absolutely, send him in. So he came in, and I sat down with him, and I said, I said, unfortunately, you're a new guy, and it's the new guys that often take the hits. I said, the guys wouldn't pick on you if they didn't like you. I said, so just let it roll off your back. And I said, keep in mind, we're getting new guys all the time. And I said, maybe in a couple, 3 weeks, you'll have somebody you can send down for some flight line. I said, better yet, I said, send them down for some prop wash. Tell them you got to wash the airplanes. He kind of looked at me, and I explained to him what the gag was. And his eyes lit up, and he was looking forward to a new guy. And so he walked out of the office and a little bit lighter in his steps. But at any rate, just some of the ancillary things that went on in our unit when I was assigned to the 430th. Thanks very much for stopping by. We'll see you again soon.